The story of one of the most viral and fastest deleted videos in internet history began that day, because some lessons are taught so harshly that they become too embarrassing to share on social media. Jake the Challenger Williams had built his empire on one simple principle: challenge everyone, fear no one, and let the views roll in. At 23 years old, his YouTube channel Jake vs. the World had amassed 5.2 million subscribers who tuned in religiously to watch him take on fighters, athletes, celebrities, and anyone brave enough to face his cameras. His content was pure modern entertainment gold, part reality TV, part sports competition, part social experiment. Jake's formula was deceptively simple but brutally effective. He would research his targets, find their weak points, provoke them with carefully crafted insults designed to go viral, then challenge them to some form of physical or mental competition. Win or lose, the content always generated millions of views, countless reaction videos, and enough controversy to keep his name trending on social media platforms. His Beverly Hills mansion had become a content creation factory. Ring lights, professional cameras, editing suites, and a fully equipped gym filled the 8,000 square foot space. Jake employed a team of 12 people: editors, cameramen, social media managers, and researchers whose sole job was to identify the next target for his channel. Controversy creates cash. Jake would tell his team during their weekly strategy meetings, "People don't subscribe to watch me be nice. They subscribe to watch me push boundaries and take down sacred cows." His greatest successes had come from challenging retired athletes and aging celebrities who couldn't keep up with his youthful energy and social media savvy. He'd embarrassed a former NFL quarterback in a throwing competition, outlifted a retired bodybuilder, and outran a past his prime sprinter. Each victory was meticulously documented, edited into viral content, and monetized across multiple platforms. But Jake's appetite for views was insatiable, and his targets were becoming increasingly difficult to find. A-list celebrities wouldn't engage with him, current professional athletes were too smart to risk their careers, and most internet personalities already knew his game. He needed something bigger, more shocking, more likely to break the internet. That's when his head researcher, Marcus Chun, brought him an idea that would change everything. "What about Chuck Norris?" Marcus said during their Monday morning meeting, sliding a tablet across the conference table. "Think about it, ultimate internet legend, millions of memes, but he's 73 years old. The contrast writes itself." Jake's eyes lit up as he scrolled through the research Marcus had compiled. Chuck Norris memes had been internet gold for over a decade. Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups. He pushes the earth down. Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. When Chuck Norris enters a room, he doesn't turn the lights on, he turns the dark off. "The memes are perfect," Jake said, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Everyone knows the character, but nobody knows if the man behind the legend can still back it up. He's 73, Marcus. I'm 23, in the best shape of my life, trained in multiple combat sports. This could be the biggest content of my career." Sarah Kim, his social media manager, looked concerned. "Chuck Norris isn't like your other targets. He's legitimately skilled, not just famous. 6-time world karate champion, black belts in multiple disciplines. Are you sure you want to pick this fight?" Jake laughed, the sound echoing through the modern glass conference room. "Sarah, that was 40 years ago. I've been training with elite coaches, modern techniques, sports science. I'm not saying I'd destroy him, but come on. A 73-year-old versus someone in their prime? The laws of physics are on my side here." Marcus pulled up Chuck's recent public appearances on his laptop. "He still looks in good shape for his age, Jake, and he's been pretty private lately. Getting him to engage might be difficult." "That's what makes it perfect," Jake replied, his influencer instincts taking over. "The more reluctant he is, the more pressure we can build. We start small, some jokes in my videos, mentions on social media. Then we escalate. Make it impossible for him to ignore without looking like he's backing down." The plan Jake developed was sophisticated in its simplicity. Phase 1 involved subtle references to Chuck Norris in his regular content, testing how his audience would react to the idea of a challenge. Phase 2 would be direct callouts on social media, tag posts designed to trend and force a response. Phase 3 was the nuclear option, showing up at events Chuck was scheduled to attend, making the challenge impossible to ignore. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake began seeding his content with Chuck Norris references. "You know who I'd love to test these new combat techniques against?" he said during a training video. "Chuck Norris. I mean, all respect to the legend, but I think it's time someone from the new generation stepped up." The response from his audience was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in from fans excited about the possibility, older viewers warning him about Chuck's reputation, and everyone sharing their favorite Chuck Norris memes. The videos performed exceptionally well, confirming Jake's instinct that this content direction had serious viral potential. Phase 2 launched with a carefully crafted Instagram post. Jake posted a side-by-side photo, himself in peak physical condition next to a recent photo of Chuck Norris. The caption read, "Respect to all the legends who came before, but every generation has to pass the torch eventually." At Chuck Norris, if you're still up for it, let's see if those legendary skills translate to 2024. What do you say? Martial arts uniform. The post exploded across social media. Within 6 hours, it had 2.3 million views, 150,000 likes, and 75,000 comments. The hashtag Chuck Norris Challenge started trending on Twitter. Reaction videos began appearing from other influencers and combat sports analysts. The story was picked up by entertainment blogs and sports media outlets. But Chuck Norris remained silent. "This is perfect," Jake told his team as they watched the metrics climb. "His silence is just building more pressure. Every day he doesn't respond makes him look more out of touch, more irrelevant." Jake escalated with a YouTube video titled, "Why Chuck Norris Won't Fight Me, and Why He Should." The 15-minute video was a masterclass in modern provocation, mixing genuine respect with subtle disrespect, acknowledging Chuck's legacy while questioning its current relevance. "Look, I genuinely admire what Chuck Norris accomplished in his era," Jake said to the camera, using the tone of someone being reasonable while saying unreasonable things. "But that era is over. Combat sports have evolved. Training methods have advanced. Sports science has unlocked new levels of human performance. I'm not saying Chuck was never good. I'm saying I represent everything good about modern athleticism and martial arts." The video gained 4.7 million views in its first week, but still no response from Chuck or his representatives. Jake's team began researching Chuck's schedule, looking for opportunities to force a face-to-face encounter. Their breakthrough came when Marcus discovered that Chuck was scheduled to attend a charity fitness event at an upscale gym in Beverly Hills. The event was being held to raise money for youth martial arts programs, and Chuck was listed as a special guest who would be demonstrating traditional techniques and discussing the philosophy behind martial arts training. "This is it," Jake announced to his team. "We're going to crash this event. Bring the full camera crew. Make sure we're live streaming everything. We'll be respectful but persistent. If he agrees to any kind of challenge, even just a friendly demonstration, we'll have the content of the decade." The charity event was held at Platinum Fitness, a luxury gym in Beverly Hills that catered to celebrities and wealthy clients. The space had been transformed for the occasion, with mats laid out for demonstrations and seating arranged for about 50 attendees who had paid premium prices to meet Chuck Norris and support the charity. Chuck arrived punctually, dressed in a simple black GI and white belt, a traditional gesture of humility that few people in the modern fitness world understood. At 73, he moved with the controlled grace of someone who had spent 5 decades perfecting the mechanics of human movement. His presence was quiet but commanding, drawing attention without demanding. Jake and his crew positioned themselves strategically around the gym, cameras ready, live stream active. His social media channels had been promoting the surprise encounter all morning, and over 200,000 people were watching the live feed as Jake prepared to make his move. The event began with Chuck demonstrating basic karate forms, explaining the principles behind each movement to an appreciative audience. His technique was flawless, economical, and powerful despite his age. Watching him move, several people in the audience began to understand why Jake's challenge might not be as one-sided as it appeared. "Martial arts," Chuck said as he completed a kata, "is not about defeating others. It's about understanding yourself, controlling your impulses, and developing the wisdom to know when to fight and when to walk away." That's when Jake made his entrance. "Mr. Norris," Jake called out, his voice carrying across the gym as his cameras captured every angle. "Jake Williams from Jake vs. the World on YouTube. I've been trying to reach you about a potential collaboration." The room fell silent. Chuck turned toward Jake with calm eyes, showing no surprise or irritation at the interruption. "Hello, Jake. I'm aware of your content." Jake felt a surge of adrenaline. This was going perfectly. "Sir, with all due respect, I represent the new generation of martial artists. My audience, over 5 million people, would love to see a friendly competition between old school and new school techniques. What do you say?" Chuck studied Jake for a moment, taking in the cameras, the live stream setup, the theatrical nature of the challenge. "What kind of competition did you have in mind?" "Whatever you're comfortable with," Jake said, though his tone suggested he was being generous. "Sparring, technique demonstration, fitness challenge. I train with elite coaches, modern methods, sports science. I think it would be educational for both our audiences." The crowd watched in fascination as two very different worlds collided. Chuck represented tradition, discipline, and earned respect. Jake represented innovation, self-promotion, and digital age confidence. The contrast was stark and compelling. "Educational," Chuck repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I think this could indeed be educational. Are you certain you want to do this publicly?" Jake's grin widened. "Absolutely. My audience deserves to see authentic content. Plus, all proceeds from this stream are going to charity anyway. Win-win for everyone." Chuck nodded slowly. Very well, but we do this properly. No cameras during the actual demonstration. Your audience can see the result, but the lesson itself should be private. Jake hesitated. His entire strategy depended on capturing every moment for content. Sir, with respect, my audience came here to see. They came to see if an old man can still perform, Chuck interrupted gently. But what they're about to witness is why some lessons can only be taught, not filmed. Something in Chuck's tone made Jake reconsider. The confidence he'd built up over weeks of planning began to waver slightly. But he was in too deep now, with too many people watching, too much at stake. Okay, Jake agreed. But we film the result, right? Whatever happens, we document the conclusion. Of course, Chuck said. Truth should always be documented. Chuck asked everyone except Jake to move to the edges of the gym, creating a large open space in the center. The cameras were turned off, the live stream paused, and for the first time in months, Jake found himself in a situation that wasn't being broadcast to millions of followers. Before we begin, Chuck said, his voice now carrying a different quality. Not harsh, but absolutely serious. I want you to understand something. What I'm about to show you isn't entertainment. It isn't content. It's education. When we're finished, you'll have a choice about what to share with your audience. Jake nodded, though he was beginning to feel like he'd walked into something larger than he'd anticipated. I understand, sir. Good. Now, show me what modern martial arts looks like. Jake launched into his routine with confidence, demonstrating the mixed martial arts techniques that had made him successful in previous challenges. His athleticism was impressive. Explosive takedowns, fluid transitions, powerful strikes thrown with the precision of someone who trained extensively. For 3 minutes, he moved around the mat, showcasing everything he'd learned from elite coaches and modern training methods. Chuck watched without moving, his attention complete but his posture relaxed. When Jake finished his demonstration, slightly winded but pleased with his performance, Chuck nodded appreciatively. Very impressive, Chuck said. You're clearly athletic, well-trained, and dedicated. Now, may I show you something? Of course, Jake replied, curious about what a 73-year-old could demonstrate that would rival his modern techniques. Chuck began to move, and everything Jake thought he knew about martial arts immediately became obsolete. There was no single moment when Chuck demonstrated superiority. Instead, there was a gradual realization that Jake was witnessing something he'd never encountered before. Chuck's movements weren't flashy or athletic. They were something else entirely, inevitable. When Jake tried to engage, his attacks found nothing but air. When he attempted to grapple, he discovered that Chuck was never where he expected. When he threw combinations, they were deflected or avoided with movements so minimal they seemed like optical illusions. But the most unsettling part wasn't Chuck's defensive abilities. It was his complete control over the entire interaction. Without appearing to try, Chuck was dictating every exchange, guiding Jake through a lesson that was being taught in real time. You're very fast, Chuck said conversationally as he guided Jake's attempted punch safely past his head. But speed without timing is just wasted energy. Jake tried harder, drawing on his conditioning and training, but the result remained the same. Chuck continued to move like water, flowing around every attack while offering gentle corrections. Your technique is sound, Chuck observed as he redirected Jake's takedown attempt, but you're fighting the opponent you expected to find, not the one standing in front of you. After 5 minutes of this, Jake was breathing hard and sweating, while Chuck appeared completely unaffected. The young YouTuber found himself in the alien experience of being thoroughly dominated without feeling like he was in a fight. I don't understand, Jake gasped, finally stopping his attacks. How are you doing this? Chuck smiled slightly. 50 years of understanding that martial arts isn't about being stronger or faster than your opponent. It's about being smarter, calmer, and more prepared. You have excellent physical skills, Jake, but you're missing the mental component that makes those skills truly effective. But I trained with the best coaches, used the latest methods, and that training shows, Chuck agreed. But you trained to defeat the opponents you could imagine, using techniques designed for the fights you expected to have. You never learned to adapt to the unexpected, to respond to what is rather than what you planned for. Jake looked around the gym, suddenly aware that 50 people had just watched him learn a lesson he wasn't prepared to learn. His confidence, built up over years of YouTube success, had been quietly dismantled by someone who seemed to barely exert effort. The cameras, Jake said weakly. We said we'd film the result. Chuck studied him with compassionate eyes. We did, and the result is that you've learned something valuable about humility, preparation, and the difference between performance and mastery. The question is, what will you do with that lesson? Jake stood in the center of the mat, faced with a choice that would define not just his content but his character. He could spin this experience into victimhood, claim that Chuck had used unfair advantages or outdated tricks. He could edit the footage to minimize his learning curve and maximize his own highlights. Or he could tell the truth. Turn the cameras back on, Jake said finally. His crew complied, and Jake found himself live streaming to 300,000 viewers, who had been waiting to see him triumph over an aging legend. Instead, they witnessed something far more valuable. "Guys," Jake said to the camera, his usual bravado replaced by genuine reflection. "I came here today thinking I was going to prove that modern training beats traditional martial arts. Instead, I learned that I've been confusing technology with wisdom, athleticism with mastery." He turned to Chuck, who stood quietly nearby. "Mr. Norris, I owe you and your legacy an apology. I thought your reputation was built on movies and memes. I didn't understand that some reputations are built on deeper foundations that don't go away just because time passed." Chuck placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "No apology necessary. Your willingness to learn publicly takes more courage than any physical challenge. That's the mark of true strength." The live stream continued for another 10 minutes, with Jake asking Chuck genuine questions about martial arts philosophy, training methods, and the mental aspects of combat sports. The content was completely different from anything Jake had ever produced: thoughtful, educational, transformative. The video became the most watched content in Jake's career, but not for the reasons he'd expected. Instead of celebrating another victory over an aging star, his audience witnessed authentic personal growth. The comment section filled with viewers sharing their own experiences with mentorship, humility, and learning from unexpected teachers. Jake never deleted the video, despite initial impulses to do so. Instead, it became the foundation for a completely new content direction. He began seeking out genuine masters and teachers, approaching them with respect rather than challenges, learning rather than competing. 6 months later, Jake had Chuck as a regular guest on his channel, exploring traditional martial arts concepts through a modern lens. His subscriber count had grown to 8.2 million, but more importantly, his content had evolved from spectacle to substance. "I used to think respect was something you took," Jake reflected in a follow-up video. "Chuck Norris taught me that real respect is something you earn by being worthy of, and sometimes the biggest victory is realizing you still have everything to learn." The story of Jake's challenge became internet legend, but not as the viral takedown he'd originally planned. Instead, it became a testament to the idea that authentic strength, the kind that lasts decades and shapes legends, comes not from defeating others, but from the wisdom to know when you've encountered something greater than yourself. And sometimes, the most valuable content is created not when you win, but when you're humble enough to learn from losing.